Stop! No one touches her! Julian's voice thundered, his eyes blazing as he shielded Elena from the guards closing in. She's my wife, Victor, and I'll tear your empire down before you lay a hand on her. The wedding crowd froze, gasps echoing as Elena's secret unraveled. A runaway heiress accused of theft, her past threatening to destroy their love. Will their bond survive this explosive betrayal, or will hidden truths shatter everything? Stay tuned to find out. If you're hooked, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to catch our latest stories fresh from the heart. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? What secrets do you think Elena's still hiding? Don't miss the twist that'll keep you guessing until the very end. Let's dive into the unraveled secret of Elena Brooks. You won't believe what happens next. The late afternoon sun spilled golden rays over Willow Creek Preschool, painting the playground in hues of amber and rose. Laughter ricocheted off the swings where children chased one another in a whirlwind of joy, their sneakers kicking up clouds of dust. Amid the vibrant chaos of the school's annual charity fair, Julian Carter stood like a statue, an outsider in a world of sticky fingers and cotton candy. At 35, the CEO of Carter Renewables, a renewable energy empire that powered half the city's skyline, was a man carved from discipline and ambition. His tailored navy suit, crisp and unyielding, clung to his 6'2" frame, a stark contrast to the kaleidoscope of balloons and hand-painted banners fluttering around him. His sharp blue eyes, usually fixed on spreadsheets or boardroom adversaries, scanned the crowd with a restless unease. He was here only because his company's logo adorned the event's flyers, a nod to their community outreach program. But Julian felt like a fish out of water, his polished loafers sinking slightly into the grass. He adjusted his cufflinks, the silver glinting in the sunlight, and sighed. Just an hour, he muttered to himself, checking his watch. The fair was a riot of color and noise. Booths selling homemade cookies, face-painting stations, and a dunk tank where a drenched teacher howled with laughter as kids cheered. Julian's lips twitched, a rare hint of amusement softening his guarded expression. He wasn't heartless. He'd funded scholarships and rebuilt community centers. But this raw, unfiltered joy was foreign to him. His life was penthouses and private jets, not lemonade stands and glitter-strewn crafts. Then he saw her. Across the field, near a mural of lopsided sunflowers painted by tiny hands, stood Elena Brooks. The 28-year-old preschool teacher moved with a quiet grace that seemed to hush the chaos around her. Her dark curls, loosely tied with a yellow ribbon, bounced as she knelt to tie a child's shoelace. Her skin, a rich ebony, glowed under the sun, and her warm brown eyes sparkled with patience as she listened to a little girl's breathless story about a lost crayon. Elena's simple sundress, a soft green that swayed with her movements, and her worn sneakers marked her as someone who belonged here, rooted in this world of small wonders. She stood brushing dirt from her hands, and her smile, gentle yet radiant, hit Julian like a jolt of electricity. He didn't know why his feet started moving. Maybe it was the way she laughed, a melody that cut through the clamor, or the ease with which she calmed a crying toddler, turning sobs into giggles with a whispered word. Whatever it was, Julian found himself weaving through the crowd, drawn to her like a moth to a flame. She was at a booth now, arranging handmade bookmarks on a checkered tablecloth, each one adorned with intricate floral patterns drawn in vibrant ink. A sign read, "Bookmarks for art supplies, $2 each." Julian stopped, his shadow falling over the table. Elena looked up, and their eyes met. For a moment, the world stilled. The children's shrieks, the chatter, the clink of coins in donation jars faded. Her gaze was steady, curious, and unguarded, a stark contrast to the calculated looks he was used to in his world of power plays and hidden agendas. "These are impressive," Julian said, picking up a bookmark with delicate vines curling around its edges. His voice, usually clipped and commanding, softened, almost hesitant. "Did the kids make them?" Elena's laugh was like wind chimes, light and infectious. "No, that's my handiwork," she said, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "The kids' art is, let's say, more abstract. Think finger paint explosions." Her eyes twinkled with humor, and Julian felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest. He chuckled, a rare sound that surprised even him. "Fair enough. They're beautiful. You've got a real talent. Thank you, she said, her smile widening. I'm Elena Brooks, by the way. She extended a hand, her fingers slender but calloused, evidence of hours spent crafting or digging in the school's garden. Julian Carter, he replied, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, grounding, and he held on a fraction longer than necessary. I'm with the company sponsoring this. He gestured vaguely, suddenly aware of how out of place he must look. Oh, the fancy logo people, Elena teased, nodding toward a banner with Carter Renewables' sleek emblem. Thanks for helping us out. The kids need all the supplies they can get. Julian nodded, unsure why his pulse quickened. He wasn't a man who flustered easily. Boardrooms were his battlefield, and he always emerged victorious. Yet here, under Elena's warm gaze, he felt like a schoolboy fumbling for words. Glad to help, he managed, picking up another bookmark, this one with tiny daisies. What's the cause today? Art supplies for the classroom, Elena said, her voice earnest. We're trying to get more paints, clay, brushes, things that let the kids express themselves. It's amazing what they create when you give them the tools. He nodded, glancing at the mural behind her, where a child had painted a wobbly rainbow. I can see that. Creativity's important. He paused, then added, You seem to love what you do. I do, she said, her eyes softening. These kids, they remind you what matters. They're honest, you know? No pretense, just pure heart. Julian's throat tightened. Honesty, heart, words he rarely encountered in his world of contracts and cunning. He wanted to say something profound, but instead he blurted, I'll take 10. Elena blinked, then laughed again, the sound wrapping around him like a warm blanket. 10? You must really love reading. Something like that, he said, a sheepish grin breaking through his usual stoicism. He handed her a crisp $100 bill, waving off her attempt to make change. Keep it for the kids. Her eyes widened, but she didn't protest. That's generous. Thank you, Julian. Really. He shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. It's nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Not to her, and somehow not to him. He lingered, pretending to study the bookmarks, stealing glances at her as she chatted with a parent who approached. Her ease, her warmth, her unassuming beauty. It was magnetic. He wanted to know more, to unravel the story behind those kind eyes. Tell me, he said when the parent left, leaning casually against the table. How long have you been teaching here? 3 years, Elena said, arranging a stack of bookmarks. Moved to the city for a fresh start. This place, it feels like home. Her voice held a hint of something, nostalgia maybe, or a carefully guarded secret. Julian noticed but didn't press. Fresh start, huh? He said, his tone light. From where? A small town upstate, she said quickly, her smile tightening just enough to be noticeable. Nothing exciting, just needed a change. He nodded, sensing a boundary. I get that. Sometimes you need to shake things up. He wanted to ask more, but a group of kids ran up, tugging at Elena's dress, babbling about a butterfly they'd seen. She crouched to their level, her face lighting up as she listened, and Julian watched, captivated. She was a beacon in this chaotic scene, her presence steady and serene. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, Julian realized he didn't want to leave. I should let you get back to it, he said reluctantly, stepping back. But maybe I'll swing by again. For the kids, of course. Of course, Elena said, her eyes dancing with amusement. We're here every day. Bring your green thumb next time. We could use help in the garden. He laughed, the sound foreign to his own ears. Deal. As he walked away, the fair's noise swallowing him, Julian felt a shift inside. Elena Brooks wasn't just a teacher selling bookmarks. She was a mystery, a spark, a glimpse of something real in his polished, predictable world. He didn't know it yet, but that chance encounter had set his heart on a collision course with a love that would challenge everything, and a secret that could tear it all apart. The city hummed with restless energy as Julian Carter navigated its steel and glass arteries, his sleek black car cutting through the evening traffic. It had been a week since the charity fair at Willow Creek Preschool, and Elena Brooks haunted his thoughts like a melody he couldn't shake. Her laugh, her quiet grace, the way her brown eyes held a story she hadn't told. It all lingered, a stark contrast to the cold precision of his penthouse life. At 35, Julian was a master of control, his days dictated by boardroom battles and quarterly reports. Yet Elena had slipped past his defenses, a spark of warmth in his calculated world. He told himself he was returning to the preschool to discuss sponsorships, but the truth was simpler. He needed to see her again. Willow Creek's playground was quieter today, the fair's chaos replaced by the soft chatter of children painting in the school garden. Julian, still in his tailored suit, felt absurdly out of place as he stepped onto the grass, his polished shoes sinking slightly. He spotted Elena kneeling beside a flower bed, her green sundress dusted with soil, her dark curls tied back with a scarf. She was guiding a small boy's hands to plant a sunflower seed, her voice gentle but firm. "Press it down just a little, Jamal. Give it a cozy bed." Julian hesitated, his usual confidence faltering. What was he doing here? He was a CEO, not a gardener. But then Elena looked up, her eyes catching his, and her smile, radiant, unguarded, erased his doubts. "Well, look who's back," she called, brushing dirt from her hands as she stood. "Did you come to check on your bookmark investment?" He chuckled, the sound easing the knot in his chest. "Something like that. Thought I'd see what else you're roping donors into." He gestured at the garden, where kids giggled, smearing dirt on their cheeks. "Perfect timing," Elena said, her tone playful. "We're short a pair of hands. Care to get dirty?" Julian raised an eyebrow, glancing at his pristine suit. "This is custom Italian wool, you know." "And these are custom sunflowers," whoa, she shot back, holding up a packet of seeds. "Your call, Mr. Carter." The challenge in her eyes was irresistible. Before he knew it, Julian was shrugging off his jacket, rolling up his sleeves, and kneeling beside her, the earth cool under his fingers. A 5-year-old girl, her braids adorned with beads, handed him a trowel and promptly critiqued his technique. "You're digging too deep, mister," she huffed, and Elena laughed, the sound wrapping around him like a warm breeze. As they worked, their conversation flowed effortlessly. Elena spoke of the kids, how Jamal dreamed of being an astronaut, how little Aisha painted rainbows to fix sad days. Julian, usually guarded, found himself sharing snippets of his world. The pressure of running a company, the loneliness of a life built on ambition. "I lost my parents young," he admitted, surprising himself. "Built everything from scratch. Sometimes I wonder if I missed something along the way." Elena's eyes softened, but she didn't pry. "You're here now," she said simply. "That's a start." Her words lingered, a quiet invitation to step into her world. Over the next weeks, Julian did just that. He traded boardroom lunches for evenings at Willow Creek, helping with art projects or reading to the kids. Elena's life was a tapestry of small, vivid moments. Cramped community centers where she taught after-school classes, jazz nights at hole-in-the-wall bars, walks through the city park where she'd hum Ella Fitzgerald tunes, her voice soft and soulful. Julian, whose penthouse overlooked the city's glittering skyline, found himself craving these moments more than his usual power dinners. One evening, they sat on a park bench, the air thick with the scent of blooming jasmine. Elena sipped a coffee, her fingers wrapped around the cup. "You don't strike me as a park guy," she teased, glancing at his still impeccable shirt. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Julian said, leaning back, his arm brushing hers. "Maybe I just like the company." She smiled, but her eyes flickered with something. Hesitation, perhaps. "This world," she said, gesturing at the park, the distant laughter of kids. "It's messy, Julian. Not like your shiny offices." "Messy's growing on me," he replied, his voice low. He wanted to say more, to ask about the shadow that sometimes crossed her face when she thought he wasn't looking. But he sensed a boundary, a story she wasn't ready to tell. Their connection deepened through stolen moments. At a local jazz bar, the saxophone wailed, and Elena swayed in her seat, eyes closed, lost in the music. Julian watched, captivated by her unguarded joy. "You love this," he said, leaning close to be heard over the music. "It's freedom," she replied, opening her eyes. "Music says what words can't." He took her hand, his heart pounding. "Dance with me." The bar was crowded, the dance floor a patchwork of swaying bodies, but as they moved together, it felt like they were alone. Elena's head rested against his chest, her warmth seeping through his shirt. Julian's world, stock tickers, mergers, endless emails, faded. Here, with her, he felt alive, tethered to something real. But beneath his joy, a question gnawed. Why did she guard her past so fiercely? Elena felt it too. The pull toward Julian, the danger of it. She was Elena Brooks, preschool teacher, but she was also Eleanor Ashcroft, runaway heiress. Her old life, a gilded cage of wealth and control, loomed like a storm cloud. Julian's world, with its power and privilege, was too close to what she'd fled. Yet his vulnerability disarmed her. He wasn't like Victor Langston, the tycoon her mother had tried to bind her to. Julian listened, laughed, cared. Still, every time he asked about her past, she deflected, offering half-truths about a small-town childhood. One night, as they walked through the city, streetlights casting long shadows, Julian stopped by a fountain, its water glinting under the moon. "You're a mystery, Elena Brooks," he said, half teasing, half serious. "I want to know you. All of you." Her heart raced, a mix of longing and fear. "There's not much to know," she lied, forcing a smile. "Just a teacher who loves jazz and sunflowers." He studied her, his blue eyes searching. "I don't buy it, but I'll wait." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him about the mansion she'd escaped, the arranged marriage, the bonds she'd taken to survive. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she squeezed his hand. "Thanks for being patient." As they parted, Elena's mind churned. Julian was breaking down her walls, and she was falling for him. Hard, but her secret was a ticking bomb. If he learned the truth, would he see her as Elena, the woman he danced with under the stars, or as Eleanor, the heiress who'd fled a fortune? The question haunted her, even as Julian walked away, his heart already hers, unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. The city's pulse thrummed through the evening air, a symphony of car horns and distant laughter, as Elena Brooks sat alone in her modest apartment. The flicker of a single candle cast shadows on the walls, dancing across a worn photograph she clutched. A faded image of a young girl in a velvet dress, standing beside a kind-eyed man with laugh lines. Her father. The memory of him stung, a bittersweet ache that never dulled. Elena's dark curls fell loose, framing her face as she traced the photo's edges, her brown eyes heavy with secrets. For 6 years she'd buried her past, but Julian Carter's presence was unearthing it, like a tide pulling at hidden wreckage. Every smile, every touch, drew her closer to him, and closer to the truth she feared would shatter everything. Elena wasn't just a preschool teacher with a love for jazz and sunflowers. She was Eleanor Ashcroft, heiress to a real estate empire that sprawled across the eastern seaboard. Born into a world of crystal chandeliers and private tutors, she'd grown up in a Long Island mansion where every step was choreographed by her mother, Cassandra Ashcroft. Cassandra was a woman of steel ambition, her beauty as cold as the marble floors of their estate. To her, Eleanor was a chess piece, destined for a strategic marriage to cement the family's legacy. At 22, that destiny took the form of Victor Langston, a 50-year-old tycoon whose fortune rivaled theirs. His gray eyes glinted with possession, his smile a predator's promise. "You'll be the perfect wife," he'd said, his hand heavy on her shoulder. The memory made Elena shudder, even now. She hadn't loved Victor. She'd barely known him. But Cassandra saw the match as a triumph, a merger of wealth and power. "This is your duty," her mother had declared, dismissing Eleanor's protests. "Love is a fairy tale. Security is real." Eleanor's father, Henry, had been her only ally, a gentle man who read her poetry and taught her to value kindness over gold. But he died when she was 16, leaving her alone in a house that felt like a gilded cage. Without him, Eleanor's spirit withered under Cassandra's control. The breaking point came the night before her engagement to Victor. A lavish party filled the mansion, guests toasting the union with champagne that tasted like ash in Eleanor's mouth. Victor's gaze followed her, proprietary and suffocating. In her room, she found a letter from her father, hidden in a book of Keats he'd loved. "Choose your own path, my star," it read, tucked beside a key to a safe containing $1 million in bearer bonds, her inheritance, meant to give her freedom. That night as the house slept, Eleanor made her choice. She took the bonds, slipped out in a maid's coat, and vanished into the dawn, leaving behind her name, her wealth, and the life she despised. She became Elena Brooks, adopting her grandmother's maiden name, and built a new world in the city. Teaching at Willow Creek gave her purpose. The children's laughter filled the void her father's death had left. She sold the bonds to survive, using the money to rent a small apartment, buy art supplies for her students, and fade into anonymity. For 6 years she'd succeeded, keeping her past locked in a mental vault. But Julian's arrival had cracked that vault open. Julian Carter was everything she'd fled from. A man of wealth, power, and influence. His penthouse, his tailored suits, his ease in a world of elites mirrored the one she'd escaped. Yet he was different. His blue eyes held a quiet vulnerability, a loneliness that echoed her own. When he spoke of losing his parents, of building his company from nothing, she saw not a tycoon but a man who'd fought for his place, just as she had. His kindness disarmed her. The way he knelt in the garden with her students, his laughter when a child smeared dirt on his shirt, the way he listened when she spoke of music or dreams. He wasn't Victor, with his cold control, or Cassandra, with her calculating gaze. Julian was warmth, possibility, danger. Danger because she was falling for him. Every moment with him, dancing in a crowded jazz bar, sharing coffee on a park bench, pulled her deeper. Last night by the fountain, when he'd called her a mystery and promised to wait, her heart had ached with the urge to confess. But fear stopped her. What if he saw her not as Elena, the woman who hummed Ella Fitzgerald, but as Eleanor, the heiress who'd stolen and run? Would he recoil from her deception, or worse, pity her for the life she'd abandoned? The thought was a knife, twisting in her chest. Elena set the photo down, her hands trembling. She crossed to the window, the city's lights a glittering reminder of the world she'd left. Julian's world. Their lives were entwining. Yesterday, he'd brought her a sunflower from the school garden, a shy gesture that made her laugh. "For your collection," he'd said, and she'd tucked it behind her ear, her pulse racing. But with every step closer, her secret loomed larger. She told him she was from a small town, a half-truth that tasted like betrayal. How long could she keep lying? The candle flickered, casting her shadow long and wavering. Elena's mind churned with memories of her old life, the suffocating dinners where Victor's hand lingered on hers, Cassandra's voice dictating her every move. She'd escaped, but at what cost? The bonds, her father's gift, were gone, spent to build this fragile freedom. If Cassandra or Victor ever found her, they'd brand her a thief, a traitor. And Julian, would he stand by her, or would her past taint the way he saw her? She sank onto her couch, curling her knees to her chest. Julian deserved the truth, but the risk was paralyzing. She imagined his face, the warmth in his eyes turning to shock, or worse, distrust. Yet hiding felt like betraying him anew. He'd opened his heart, sharing his fears, his dreams. Could she keep closing hers? Outside, a siren wailed, jarring her thoughts. Elena stood, pacing the small room. She stopped at a shelf where a single bookmark, one she'd made with daisies like the ones Julian had bought, rested beside a jazz record, symbols of their budding connection. She touched the bookmark, her resolve hardening. She couldn't tell him yet, not until she was sure. Sure of what, she didn't know. His love, her courage, or the strength to face her past if it came crashing back. For now she'd hold him close, savor the moments that felt like freedom. Tomorrow she'd see him again at Willow Creek, where he'd promised to help with a mural project. She'd smile, laugh, let his presence soothe her fears. But deep down, Elena knew the truth was a storm gathering on the horizon. When it broke, it would test everything. Her new life, her love, her very self. And as she blew out the candle, plunging the room into darkness, she whispered a silent prayer that she'd be strong enough to weather it. The autumn air carried a crisp bite as Julian Carter stood at the edge of the city's botanical gardens, his breath visible in the twilight. Fairy lights twinkled like captured stars, strung across a canopy of ancient oaks, casting a golden glow over a small table set for two. The scent of roses mingled with the earthy tang of fallen leaves, and a fountain nearby murmured softly, its rhythm a counterpoint to Julian's racing heart. At 35, he'd faced hostile takeovers and high-stakes negotiations without flinching, but tonight, his hands trembled as he adjusted the velvet box in his pocket. The sapphire ring inside, its deep blue chosen to match Elena Brooks's favorite scarf, felt like a talisman, a promise of a future he'd never dared imagine until her. 6 months with Elena had reshaped him, and tonight he'd ask her to be his forever. Julian glanced at his watch, the seconds ticking like a countdown. Elena was due any moment, unaware of the surprise he'd orchestrated. He'd told her only that they were having a special dinner, a vague excuse that had earned her playful skepticism. "You're up to something, Carter," she'd teased, her brown eyes sparkling. He'd grinned, dodging her questions, but inside he was a storm of nerves and hope. Elena had slipped into his life like sunlight through a cracked window, illuminating corners he'd long ignored. Her laughter, her quiet strength, the way she hummed jazz tunes while painting with her students, it all made his penthouse world feel hollow without her. But her guarded past, those fleeting shadows in her gaze, gnawed at him. Tonight he'd lay his heart bare, hoping she'd trust him with hers. The crunch of gravel snapped him from his thoughts. Elena appeared on the garden path, her silhouette framed by the fading sunset. She wore a simple navy dress that hugged her curves, her dark curls loose and catching the light. Her ebony skin glowed under the fairy lights, and her smile, tentative, curious, sent a jolt through Julian. "This is wow," she said, her voice soft as she took in the scene. "You didn't have to go all out." "For you, I did," Julian replied, his voice low. He crossed to her, offering his hand. Her fingers, warm and steady, intertwined with his, grounding him. He led her to the table, where a single candle flickered beside plates of her favorite dishes: roasted salmon, rosemary potatoes, and a chocolate tart she'd once raved about. A violinist, hidden among the roses, began a soft melody, and Elena's eyes widened. "Julian, this is too much," she said, laughing, but her gaze held a flicker of unease, as if the extravagance stirred something she'd rather forget. "Nothing's too much for you," he said, pulling out her chair. As they sat, their conversation flowed. Stories of her students, his latest project, the jazz bar they'd visit tomorrow. But beneath her warmth, Julian sensed a tension, a hesitation that surfaced when he asked about her childhood or dreams beyond teaching. She'd deflect with a laugh or a quick change of topic, and he'd let it slide, trusting she'd open up in time. Tonight, though, he needed her to feel safe, to see he loved her for who she was, not the mysteries she guarded. After dinner, Julian stood, his heart pounding like a drum. "Walk with me?" he asked, offering his arm. Elena nodded, her hand slipping into the crook of his elbow. They strolled through the garden, the path lined with roses that glowed under the moonlight. The fountain loomed ahead, its water catching the stars like a liquid mirror. Julian's pulse roared in his ears. This was it, the moment he'd rehearsed in his mind 100 times, each version ending with her in his arms. He stopped by the fountain, turning to face her. Elena's eyes searched his, curious and a little wary. "You're awfully quiet," she said, tilting her head. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Julian took a deep breath, the air sharp in his lungs. "Elena," he began, his voice steady despite the storm inside, "you've changed me. I used to think life was about winning, building something bigger, stronger. I was good at it, but I was alone. Then I met you." He paused, stepping closer, his hands finding hers. "You showed me what matters. Laughter, kindness, the way you make every moment brighter. You're my home, Elena, and I didn't know I was searching for one until you." Her breath hitched, her eyes glistening. Julian's throat tightened, but he pressed on. "I want to build a life with you, not just today, but every day, through every challenge, every joy." He dropped to one knee, the gravel biting into his skin as he pulled the velvet box from his pocket. The sapphire ring gleamed, its facets catching the light. "Elena Brooks, will you marry me?" Time stopped. Elena's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Her heart screamed yes. Julian was her safe harbor, her unexpected joy. But her past roared to life, a tidal wave of fear. She was Eleanor Ashcroft, runaway heiress, a woman who'd stolen her father's bonds to escape a life of control. Julian's world of wealth and power was too close to the one she'd fled, and her secret, a thief's shadow, threatened to taint their love. What if he learned the truth and saw her not as Elena, but as a liar? The thought was a blade, slicing through her joy. Yet as she looked into his eyes, she saw only love, raw, unguarded, unwavering. Julian wasn't Victor Langston with his cold possession, or her mother with her calculated schemes. He was the man who danced with her in a crowded bar, who planted sunflowers with her students, who waited patiently for her trust. Her heart won, drowning out the fear. "Yes, Julian," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes." Julian's face broke into a radiant smile, relief flooding him. He slipped the ring onto her finger, the sapphire a perfect fit, and stood, pulling her into his arms. Their kiss was fierce, a collision of hope and promise. The fountain's soft hum their only witness. Elena clung to him, her tears soaking his shirt, her body shaking with the weight of her unspoken truth. She wanted to confess about the mansion, the bonds, the life she'd abandoned, but the words lodged in her throat. Not tonight, she told herself. Tonight was for them. They stood by the fountain, wrapped in each other, the violin's melody weaving through the air. Julian's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I love you," he murmured, his voice a vow. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Elena nodded, her heart aching with love and dread. "I love you too," she said, the words both truth and burden. As they walked back to the table hand in hand, she felt the ring's weight on her finger, a symbol of their future, but also a reminder of the past she couldn't outrun. She'd tell him soon, she promised herself, when the moment was right. But deep down, a voice whispered that the storm was coming, and when it hit, it would test the very love they'd just sealed. The spring sun bathed the historic lakeside estate in a soft, golden haze, its sprawling gardens awash with lilacs and the sweet hum of bees. The air shimmered with anticipation as guests gathered under a floral arch, their murmurs blending with the gentle lap of water against the shore. Julian Carter, resplendent in a charcoal tuxedo, stood at the altar, his blue eyes alight with nervous joy. At 35, the CEO of Carter Renewables was no stranger to pressure, but today his heart pounded with a different stakes: the vow to love Elena Brooks forever. The sapphire ring on his finger, a twin to the one he'd given her, gleamed as he adjusted his cufflinks, scanning the crowd for her. She was moments away, and the thought of her smile steadied him against the whirlwind of emotion. Elena, hidden in the estate's bridal suite, smoothed the ivory lace of her gown, its sleeves delicate as spiderwebs. Her dark curls, adorned with a single white orchid, framed her ebony skin, and her brown eyes, usually warm, flickered with a storm of nerves. She was Eleanor Ashcroft, runaway heiress, and today she'd become Julian's wife, binding herself to a man whose world teetered too close to the one she'd fled. Her secret, a stolen million in bonds, a life abandoned, pressed against her chest like a lead weight. She'd invited her estranged mother, Cassandra, hoping for a bridge to healing, unaware that Cassandra now stood beside Victor Langston, her husband and Elena's former betrothed, among the guests. Their presence was a hidden fuse, ready to ignite. The string quartet struck a tender chord, and the crowd hushed. Elena stepped onto the aisle, her gown trailing like a whisper of clouds. Gasps rippled through the guests. Julian's colleagues, Elena's fellow teachers, and parents of her students. But her eyes locked on Julian. His smile, radiant and unwavering, anchored her. She reached him, her hand trembling as it found his, and they turned to the officiant, the lake sparkling behind them. Their vows were a melody of promises, to cherish, to challenge, to stand as one through every storm. Julian's voice, steady and deep, vowed, "I choose you, Elena, today and always." Elena's response, soft but fierce, echoed, "And I choose you, Julian, with all I am." The officiant's words sealed their union, I pronounce you husband and wife." Julian's kiss was a spark, igniting cheers that shook the air. But as they turned to face the crowd, a voice, sharp, venomous, sliced through the joy. "This marriage is a sham." Cassandra Ashcroft stood, her elegant frame rigid, her face a mask of fury. "She's not Elena Brooks. She's Eleanor Ashcroft, my daughter, who fled her family and her duty." The crowd froze, a collective gasp sucking the air from the garden. Julian's hand tightened around Elena's, his jaw clenching. Before he could speak, Victor Langston rose, his gray eyes glinting like steel. "It's worse, Carter," he boomed, his voice carrying the weight of old money and older grudges. "She's a thief. She stole $1 million in bonds from my vault the night she vanished. I have proof, bank records, security footage. She's a fraud hiding behind this teacher facade." Chaos erupted. Guests whispered, some leaning forward, others recoiling. Elena's students' parents exchanged shocked glances, while Julian's colleagues murmured in disbelief. Elena's heart thundered, her vision blurring. Victor's accusation wasn't just a revelation. It was a guillotine, poised to sever her new life. She felt Julian's gaze heavy with questions, but she couldn't meet it. Her past had caught her, and it was uglier than she'd feared. Victor signaled, and two security guards stepped forward, their faces grim, handcuffs glinting in the sunlight. "Arrest her," he barked. "She'll face justice now." The crowd gasped, a few standing in protest. Elena's colleague, Miss Thompson, clutched her husband's arm, whispering, "She's no thief." Julian's voice roared, cutting through the din. "Stop! No one touches her!" He stepped in front of Elena, his body a shield, his eyes blazing with fury. "Victor, you're out of line. She's my wife, and I'll tear your empire apart before you lay a hand on her. My lawyers have dirt on you, bribes, tax evasion, offshore accounts. Push me, and you're finished." Victor's face twisted, a flicker of doubt crossing his features. The guards hesitated, glancing between the tycoon and Julian's unyielding stare. Elena, trembling, clutched Julian's arm, her voice a whisper. "Julian, I can't let you fight him alone." "You're not alone," he said fiercely, his hand covering hers. But the weight of her secret crushed her. She had to speak, to face the truth before it consumed them both. Stepping forward, Elena's voice quavered, but held firm. "It's true," she said, her words silencing the crowd. "I was Eleanor Ashcroft. I left because my mother and Victor tried to control me, to marry me off for their gain. They wanted a trophy, not a daughter." She turned to Julian, tears streaming. "The bonds, I took them. They were my father's, left to me in his will for my freedom. I sold them to start over, to become Elena Brooks. I wanted to tell you, Julian, but I was terrified you'd see me as a liar, not the woman you love." Her gaze swept the guests, defiant yet raw. "I'm no thief. I chose this life. Teaching, loving, living on my terms. I love Julian for who he is, not his wealth. I hope he can love who I've become." Julian's face was a storm of shock and pain, but his hand never left hers. Before he could respond, Victor sneered, "You're a disgrace, Eleanor. You'll rot in jail." He nodded to the guards, who advanced again. Julian's voice thundered, "Enough! If anyone here can't accept my wife, leave now." He faced the crowd, his authority unshakable. "Elena is my choice, my partner. Her past doesn't change that." Silence fell, heavy and electric. Then Miss Thompson stood, her voice clear. "We know Elena. She's the heart of Willow Creek. She's no criminal." Other teachers nodded, parents clapping, their support a tide against Victor's venom. A child's voice piped up, "Miss Elena's the best," and laughter broke the tension. Victor, sensing defeat, stormed out, Cassandra trailing him, her face pale with shame. Elena's knees buckled, and Julian caught her, his arms a fortress. "I've got you," he whispered, but his eyes held questions she couldn't face. Overwhelmed, she pulled away, her gown trailing as she fled to the garden, sobs tearing through her. The crowd parted, their whispers a cacophony of pity and intrigue. By the lake, Elena collapsed on a bench, her tears soaking the lace of her dress. Her secret was out, her love at risk. Julian's footsteps followed, steady and sure, but she couldn't look at him. The wedding, meant to be their beginning, had become a battlefield, and the war for their future was just starting. The city was a restless beast, its neon veins pulsing under a starless sky as Elena Brooks stumbled into her cramped apartment, the echo of the wedding's chaos ringing in her ears. Her ivory gown, now streaked with grass and tears, hung heavy on her frame, a ghost of the joy it was meant to embody. She dropped her purse, the sapphire ring on her finger glinting like a cruel reminder of the vows she'd just made, and the secret that had shattered them. Eleanor Ashcroft, thief, runaway, fraud. Victor Langston's accusations clawed at her, but worse was the memory of Julian Carter's face, etched with shock and unspoken questions. She'd fled the lakeside estate, leaving him amidst the wreckage of their perfect day, and now, alone in the dim glow of a single lamp, Elena felt the walls of her carefully built life collapsing. She sank onto the couch, her dark curls falling loose, her brown eyes red-rimmed and haunted. The truth was out. She was Eleanor Ashcroft, who'd taken $1 million in bonds to escape a gilded cage. She'd confessed to Julian, to the world. But the weight of her deception pressed harder than Victor's threats. Julian had defended her, his voice a thunderclap against the guards, but could he love her now, knowing she'd lied? The thought was a dagger, twisting deeper with every breath. She wanted to run again, to vanish as she had 6 years ago, but her heart anchored her to Julian, to the man who'd danced with her under the stars, who'd knelt in the garden with her students. She couldn't abandon him, not after he'd stood as her shield. Elena's gaze fell on a sunflower bookmark on the coffee table, one Julian had bought at the charity fair. She touched it, her fingers trembling. "I should have told you," she whispered, as if he could hear her across the city's sprawl. Victor's threat, to have her arrested, to brand her a criminal, loomed like a storm cloud, but it was Julian's silence she feared most. Would he come for her, or had her betrayal carved too deep a wound? She stood, pacing the small room, her gown rustling like a whisper of regret. Her suitcase lay open by the bed, half packed in a moment of panic. She could leave tonight, start over somewhere new, but the idea felt like betraying Julian all over again. Dawn broke, gray and heavy, as Elena made her decision. She couldn't face the city's glare, not yet. She needed sanctuary, a place to breathe. Willow Creek Preschool was her haven, its colorful walls and children's laughter, a balm for her fractured soul. She changed into jeans and a sweater, the gown discarded like a shed skin, and slipped out, the morning air sharp against her face. The school was quiet, its playground empty, the swing swaying in a gentle breeze. Elena let herself in, her key trembling in the lock, and headed to the art room. Crayon drawings lined the walls, rainbows, rockets, lopsided hearts, each one a testament to the life she'd built. She sank into a tiny chair, her head in her hands, and let the tears come. Across town, Julian hadn't slept. His penthouse, with its sleek lines and city views, felt like a prison. He stood by the window, still in his tuxedo shirt, the bow tie long discarded. The wedding played in his mind like a broken reel. Elena's confession, Victor's venom, the guards advancing. He'd stopped them, his fury a shield, but her flight had left him reeling. She was Eleanor Ashcroft, a name that meant nothing to him until it meant everything. The bonds, the escape, the lies. They stung, but not as much as her fear, the way she'd looked at him, expecting rejection. He loved her, Elena, not the heiress, and the thought of losing her was a vice around his heart. He'd called her phone, sent texts, but she hadn't answered. Panic clawed at him, but he knew her well enough to guess where she'd go. Willow Creek. It was her refuge, her truth. He grabbed his coat, the sapphire ring on his finger, a vow he refused to break, and drove through the waking city, his mind a storm of resolve and dread. Victor's threats, legal action, public ruin, hung over them, but Julian would burn his empire to ash before letting that man touch her. Elena was his wife, his home, and he'd fight for her, no matter the cost. At Willow Creek, the art room was a quiet cocoon, the scent of paint and glue grounding Elena. She traced a child's drawing of a sunflower, her finger lingering on the wobbly petals. I'm sorry, Julian, she murmured, her voice breaking. Footsteps echoed in the hall, and she froze, her heart leaping with hope and fear. The door creaked open, and there he was, Julian, his face haggard, his blue eyes burning with something fierce and tender. His shirt was rumpled, his hair disheveled, but he was here, and that alone cracked the dam of her emotions. Elena, he said, his voice raw, crossing the room in 3 strides. Why did you run? She stood, her knees weak, tears spilling anew. I'm sorry, Julian. I should have told you. About Eleanor. The bonds, everything. I was so scared you'd hate me, see me as a fraud. He stopped inches away, his hands hovering as if afraid she'd vanish. Hate you? He said, the words rough with disbelief. Elena, I love you. I fell for the woman who sings off-key, who makes kids laugh, who makes me feel alive. I don't care about Eleanor Ashcroft or what you took to survive. I care about you, the person you chose to be. Her sob broke free and she stepped into him, her face buried against his chest. His arms wrapped around her, strong and sure, and for a moment the world's weight lifted. Victor won't stop, she whispered, her voice muffled. He'll drag me through the courts, ruin us both. Then we'll fight him, Julian said, his voice steel. Together. I've got the best lawyers and Victor's got skeletons. Plenty of them. He doesn't scare me. He pulled back, cupping her face, his thumbs brushing her tears. But you running, that terrifies me. Don't shut me out, Elena. We're in this now. Married for better or worse. She looked into his eyes, seeing not judgment, but a love that burned through her fear. I thought I'd lose you, she admitted, her voice small. I've been running so long, it's all I know. You don't have to run anymore, he said, his forehead resting against hers. I'm here. I choose you. Every day, every truth, every scar. Their kiss was desperate, a lifeline in the storm, her hands clutching his shirt as if he might dissolve. The art room, with its childish art in quiet hope, held them like a sanctuary. But outside, Victor's shadow loomed, his threats a ticking clock. Elena pulled back, her resolve hardening. I want to fight, she said, her voice steadying. For us. For this life. Julian's smile was fierce, a warrior's vow. Then we will. Starting now. As they stood hand in hand, the morning light spilled through the window, painting the room in hues of gold. The pursuit wasn't over. Victor's wrath, the public's judgment, their own wounds waited. But in that moment, they were unbreakable. Two souls forged in truth and defiance, ready to face whatever came next. The city exhaled a restless dawn, its skyline softened by a veil of mist as Elena Brooks and Julian Carter stood on the steps of Willow Creek Preschool, their hands entwined. The air was sharp, tinged with the promise of spring, but the weight of the past week clung to them like damp earth. The wedding's explosive revelation, Elena's identity as Eleanor Ashcroft, the heiress who'd taken bonds to escape a forced marriage, had ignited a firestorm. Victor Langston's threats of legal action and public disgrace loomed, a dark cloud over their fragile union. Yet in the quiet of the art room, Julian's fierce vow to fight for her had kindled a spark of hope. Now as they faced the world beyond, Elena felt a resolve harden within her. This was their chance to rebuild, not as heiress and tycoon, but as partners forging a life on their terms. Julian's blue eyes, shadowed by sleepless nights, held a steely determination as he squeezed her hand. We're in this together, he said, his voice low but unwavering. His tuxedo shirt was gone, replaced by a simple sweater, but the sapphire ring on his finger gleamed, a testament to their vows. Elena nodded, her dark curls catching the morning light, her brown eyes bright with a mix of fear and defiance. She'd spent 6 years running from her past, but Julian's love anchored her. Victor's wrath, Cassandra's betrayal, the whispers of a scandal-hungry city, they were battles to face, not chains to bind her. Their first fight was public perception. Victor, true to his venom, had leaked Elena's story to the press, painting her as a thief who'd duped a CEO. Tabloids screamed headlines, heiress turned hustler, and Carter's bride a criminal? Social media buzzed, some decrying Elena, others questioning Julian's judgment. The board of Carter Renewables, nervous about stock dips, pressed Julian to distance himself. End the marriage quietly, one director urged in a tense meeting. Julian's response was ice cold. She's my wife. Question her, you question me. Anyone want to test that? The room fell silent, but the pressure lingered. Elena felt the city's eyes on her, a weight heavier than her old life's gilded cage. She avoided the news, but snippets reached her. Cruel comments, wild speculation. Yet at Willow Creek, her sanctuary held firm. Her students, oblivious to the scandal, greeted her with hugs, their parents offering quiet support. Ms. Thompson, her colleague, pulled her aside. You're one of us, Elena. Let the vultures squawk. The words bolstered her, but the fear of dragging Julian down gnawed at her heart. Julian, however, was a force unleashed. He called a press conference, standing before a sea of cameras with Elena at his side. His voice, steady and commanding, cut through the chaos. My wife, Elena Brooks, chose freedom over a life that wasn't hers. She's no thief. She took what was rightfully hers to survive. I love her, not her past, and we'll face any challenge together. He turned to her, his smile a private vow, and Elena's throat tightened. The crowd murmured, some skeptical, others moved. The tide didn't turn overnight, but Julian's transparency, sharing Elena's story, not hiding it, planted seeds of doubt in Victor's narrative. Victor's next move was economic. He leveraged his influence to sway Carter Renewables investors, hinting at instability. A key contract teetered, and Julian spent nights on calls, his jaw tight with strain. Elena, watching him pace their temporary hotel suite, his penthouse too exposed to paparazzi, felt guilt coil in her chest. This is my fault, she said one midnight, her voice breaking. Your company, your reputation, I'm tearing it apart. Julian stopped, crossing to her in two strides. You're my life, Elena. The company's just steel and numbers. We'll rebuild, but I won't lose you. His kiss was fierce, a promise sealed in the dark, and Elena clung to him, her fear easing in his warmth. Their counterattack was personal. Elena, rejecting the Ashcroft fortune Cassandra had dangled to lure her back, proposed a bold move. The Ashcroft Scholarship Fund, named for her late father Henry, who taught her kindness over wealth. The fund would support underprivileged children's education, starting at Willow Creek. Julian poured resources into it, his company's name tied to a cause that resonated. They launched it at a community event. Elena speaking to a small crowd, her voice steady. This is for kids who deserve a chance like I did. It's my father's legacy and mine. The applause was tentative but grew, a ripple of goodwill that countered Victor's smears. The fund's launch wasn't just symbolic, it was a declaration. Elena, with Julian's help, dug into Victor's past, uncovering whispers of his own shady deals. A discreet tip to a journalist friend of Julian's sparked an investigation, and soon headlines shifted. Langston's empire under scrutiny. Victor's attacks faltered as his own secrets surfaced, his influence waning under the spotlight he tried to turn on Elena. Their second wedding was their true beginning. The first, marred by betrayal, was a memory they chose to overwrite. They planned a ceremony at Willow Creek's playground, surrounded by Elena's students, their families, and a handful of loyal friends. No grand estate, no lavish guest list, just love, raw and unadorned. Elena wore a simple white dress, its hem brushing her ankles, her curls loose and unadorned. Julian, in a linen suit, looked at her like she was the only star in his sky. The kids, giggling, tossed flower petals, their tiny hands scattering color across the grass. Ms. Thompson officiated, her voice warm. You've faced storms, she said, but love like yours builds something stronger. Their vows were new, forged in truth. Julian's voice, rough with emotion, promised, I'll stand by you, Elena, through every shadow, every dawn. Elena, tears in her eyes, vowed, I'll be your truth, Julian, in your home, always. They kissed to the sound of children's cheers and a portable speaker's jazz tune, Ella Fitzgerald's voice weaving through the air. The dance that followed, Julian spinning Elena as kids clapped, was joy distilled, messy, real, theirs. Life settled into a quieter rhythm. Julian scaled back his CEO duties, delegating to focus on sustainable projects that aligned with their values. Elena returned to teaching, her classroom a haven of paint and laughter. They moved into a cozy townhouse, its walls lined with books and art, its garden a patchwork of sunflowers the kids had planted. Victor's empire crumbled as investigations deepened, his threats reduced to bluster. Cassandra, disowning Elena, faded into irrelevance, her cold world no match for the warmth Elena had built. One evening as they sat on their porch, the city's hum a distant lullaby. Julian took Elena's hand, his thumb brushing her ring. "Worth it?" he asked, his voice soft. Elena smiled, her eyes bright with a freedom she'd fought for. Every moment. Their new beginning wasn't perfect. Scars lingered, battles loomed, but it was theirs, a tapestry woven from truth, love, and the courage to start again. The late afternoon sun draped Willow Creek Preschool in a warm amber glow, its playground alive with the laughter of children chasing soap bubbles that shimmered like tiny prisms. 5 years had passed since the storm of Elena and Julian Carter's wedding, a day when secrets unraveled and love was tested in the crucible of truth. Now their townhouse garden, a short walk from the school, was a haven of color, sunflowers nodding alongside roses, a canvas of life they'd built together. Elena, now 33, knelt beside their 4-year-old daughter, Lila, her dark curls mirroring her mother's as they painted a mural on a wooden board. Lila's brush swiped bold streaks of blue, her giggles filling the air. Julian, 40, leaned against a tree, his linen shirt rolled to the elbows, his blue eyes soft with a contentment that had once felt impossible. The sapphire ring on his finger caught the light, a quiet vow renewed daily. The scars of their past lingered, but they'd woven them into a tapestry of resilience. The Ashcroft Scholarship Fund, named for Elena's father, Henry, had grown into a beacon of hope, funding education for hundreds of underprivileged children across the city. Its heart remained at Willow Creek, where Elena still taught, her classroom a riot of crayon art and dreams. The fund's success was a triumph over Victor Langston, whose empire had crumbled under the weight of investigations Julian had quietly fueled. Tax evasion, bribery, shady offshore deals. Victor's sins had spilled into the open, his name reduced to a cautionary tale. He'd vanished from public life, his threats against Elena dissolving like smoke. Cassandra, Elena's mother, had sent a letter 2 years ago, a tentative apology stained with regret. Elena read it, her heart unmoved, and set it aside. Her family was here, in the laughter of Lila, the warmth of Julian, the community that had stood by her. Elena's past as Eleanor Ashcroft was no longer a shadow. The city had moved on, its gossip replaced by admiration for her courage. She'd shared her story in a quiet interview, not for fame but to reclaim her narrative. "I chose freedom," she'd said, her voice steady, "and I'd choose it again." The public's response, letters from strangers, support from parents, had healed wounds she hadn't known still bled. Julian, too, had transformed. He'd stepped back from the helm of Carter Renewables, delegating to focus on sustainable projects that powered communities, not just profits. His wealth, once a shield, was now a tool for good, channeled into the fun and local initiatives. The man who'd once lived for control had learned to live for connection. Today, the garden was a celebration. Willow Creek families gathered for a picnic, a tradition Elena and Julian hosted yearly to mark the fund's anniversary. Children darted through the grass, their faces painted with stars and rainbows, while parents chatted over lemonade and Elena's homemade cookies. Ms. Thompson, now the school's director, raised a glass, her voice carrying over the crowd. "To Elena and Julian, for giving our kids a future brighter than we could have dreamed." Cheers erupted, and Lila, perched on Julian's shoulders, clapped wildly, her paint-smudged hands leaving streaks on his shirt. He laughed unbothered, and Elena's heart swelled. This was their life, messy, vibrant, real. But the past wasn't entirely silent. A week ago, a lawyer had contacted Elena, representing Cassandra's estate. Her mother, frail and isolated, had left a small inheritance. Not the Ashcroft fortune, which had dwindled, but a collection of Henry's books, including the Keats volume where Elena had found his letter. The lawyer's note hinted at remorse, but Elena felt no need to respond. She'd taken the books, their worn pages a link to her father, and donated the rest to the fund. "That's closure," she'd told Julian, her voice firm. He'd kissed her forehead, understanding her need to let go. As the picnic wound down, Elena and Julian sat on a blanket. Lila sprawled between them, sketching a lopsided sunflower. The other families drifted home, leaving the garden quiet, the air thick with the scent of earth and blooms. Julian's hand found Elena's, his thumb brushing the sapphire ring. "Happy?" he asked, his voice a low murmur. She turned to him, her brown eyes bright with a freedom hard-won. "Free," she said, her smile a sunrise. The word held everything: the years of running, the pain of betrayal, the courage to rebuild. Julian's answering smile was a mirror, reflecting a man who traded ambition for love and found it infinitely richer. Lila yawned, her mural abandoned, and Julian scooped her up, her head nestling against his shoulder. "Time for a nap, little artist," he said, and Elena laughed, gathering their things. They walked to the townhouse, its windows glowing with the promise of dinner and stories. Inside, the walls were a gallery of their life, photos of their second wedding at Willow Creek, Lila's first finger painting, a framed bookmark from the fair where they'd met. A jazz record spun softly, Ella Fitzgerald's voice weaving through the air, a nod to the nights they'd danced in crowded bars. As Lila slept, Elena and Julian stood in the kitchen, washing dishes in companionable silence. The city's hum was a distant lullaby, its chaos no match for their quiet haven. "5 years," Julian said, drying a plate. "Feels like yesterday and forever." Elena nodded, her hands still in the soapy water. "I thought we'd break back then. Victor, the lies, the world watching. But we didn't. We couldn't," he said, setting the plate down to face her. "You're my strength, Elena. Always will be." His kiss was gentle, a promise etched in time, and she leaned into him, her heart full. Outside, the garden lay still, its sunflowers standing tall under the first stars. The battles they'd fought, Victor's wrath, public scorn, their own doubts, were scars that had shaped them, not defined them. Elena was no longer running, and Julian was no longer alone. Their love, forged in truth and trial, was a fire that burned steady, unquenchable. Lila's laughter, the fun's impact, the life they'd built, they were proofs of a victory deeper than wealth or status. As they climbed the stairs to bed, Elena paused, her hand on the banister. "If I could go back," she said, "I'd still choose you. Every time." Julian's eyes softened, his voice a vow. "And I'd find you, no matter where you ran." They slipped into their room, the door closing softly, the world outside fading. Their story wasn't one of secrets or scandals, but of two souls who'd chosen each other against all odds. In the quiet of their home, with Lila dreaming and the stars watching, Elena and Julian Carter were free, bound by love, rooted in truth, and ready for whatever dawn would bring. Dear listeners, what a journey Elena and Julian have taken us on, through secrets, love, and the courage to start anew. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What moved you most? Could you forgive a hidden past for love? Drop your comments below and share where you're tuning in from. Your support fuels our stories, so please like, subscribe, and hit that bell to join us for more heartfelt tales. Thank you for being part of this adventure. We can't wait to meet you again in our next story. Until then, keep chasing your own freedom and truth.